Almost there. We are learning a lot of those things. Okay, so I'm going to start again by what I just said before, saying, that today I wanted to speak about the path and oh,
There's going to be an echo. We should turn it off.
we're learning a lot of those things. That's me. What I'm just. How is that? Maybe I can fix
It's muted on this.
yeah. Start again.
Hold on, I got it right here.
Okay, perfect. Now we got it. We didn't know that we have to do that. Now
Yeah.
we do. Okay, we are just learning something. Next time we tell you how it went, if it worked out or not. Okay, so tonight I wanted to speak about the path, and how often, that feeling can come up, like there's so many obstacles in the path and they are obstacles for practice. But then if we really, stop and consider, then actually it's the obstacles themselves which make the path. The path is just like one obstacle after the next. And some of them, are really big and others are just like, you know, we don't even notice them. So, and through being willing, to open up and stay conscious with that, we mature and we grow in wisdom and compassion. And, that's really what the path is all about. And I just want to start with a poem by one of the enlightened arahant bhikkhunis at the time of the Buddha. And her name is Bhikkhuni Tissa. And she says, find your true home on the path. Find the path right here in the center of your own heart. If you keep searching in the past and searching in the future, you will search and search, but your searching will never end. If you keep searching in the past and searching in the future, you will search and search, but your searching will never end. And that's, basically saying the path is in the present moment where we are just right now with whatever it is. That's the path. And whatever is happening, we can use it to, open and learn from it and be changed by that experience. And then, through repeating that opening like a million times or more than that, really, uh, we will be changed by that experience. And it's that letting go, which is very difficult to explain, but by doing it again and again, we get a taste of that open mind which has let go. And then we become more and more confident that this is actually what we are looking for. It's not things, it's not, particular experiences, but it's that letting go of wanting anything, which is when we are truly feeling, and a feeling of fulfillment, a feeling of connectedness with our life and with ourselves and with others, and a feeling of all wishes are fulfilled because there are no wishes at this very moment. And through repetition, we just train ourselves to have more and more confidence in that resting in awareness. And then, of course, the mind slips again into holding on or defending against something. And then as we remember it, we let go again. And then again, it's like this taste of freedom for a moment only, maybe. And it's this, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, which is the practice. And then through the repetition, we become more and more, courageous, really. In even, more and more challenging situations, we remember, oh, letting go. And then we sleep again and then letting go again. It's a skill which we learn through training ourselves in trusting that openness of the mind. And it doesn't mean that all problems are solved, but it's a different place from where we connect with whatever is happening in our lives. And taking a different, having a different angle on all of this, not taking it so personal, and having a sense of curiosity and a sense of faith in the teachings, that it really works. And if you have a lot of ideals, then it's very difficult, because there's a lot of shoulds and should nots in the mind, and that makes it very difficult to to stay conscious, because the stories can be very, very convincing. But then, over the years, I have observed, myself on the path, that over the years, it's always the same stories. And then over like 10 years or so, you still notice, I'm still, falling for the same stories. So it becomes like a little bit easier, to wake up quicker to it. And, remembering, being conscious of the ideals we have. It's not that we shouldn't have any ideals, but to be conscious of them. That's what's really important here. Because I think it's very good to have a guiding star for one's practice, but then, to kind of try to really become that is very counterproductive. But rather, becoming aware of the arising and ceasing of perfection as well, and the arising and ceasing of difficulties. And it's about that, it's about trusting the arising and ceasing, trusting the impermanence of whatever it is, a perfect experience or a difficult experience or a boring one. That's what they all have in common, and that's what's liberating, to notice that impermanence of all of those experiences. And then to have, the mindfulness and the courage and the clarity of mind, that we remember that, whenever we are caught up in something, to just making it conscious. That's all what's needed. It's not that we shouldn't have this thought or that thought or anything. It's just about making it conscious, and then stepping out of that identity into, this much bigger space, opening the mind and letting go. And that really matures us. It burns away attachment. It just burns away those patterns of mind, which some of them have very strong underlying conditioning from maybe early childhood, where we have experienced some really, difficult trauma maybe. And then that doesn't go away quickly. It can take a very long time, and, we carry it probably through lifetimes. But through making it conscious, we can start, to gain some perspective on it, and allow those obstacles on the path to be actually our gifts, our opportunity to train ourselves. And, often the most difficult experiences can be, an opening onto the path. In my case, I think many of you have heard that already, but in my case, it was, for example, the very sudden death of my mother when I was 28 years old from a horse riding accident. She died, and that was a very shocking experience for me then, and it opened me, it matured me very, very quickly. Because until then, I had used quite a lot of strategies to distract myself from suffering as good as that was possible, and some of those substances and different things what I did, they were rather unskillful. They didn't really fit into the 5 precepts, I must admit. And through the sudden death of my mother, I was really jolted out of that because I felt like I don't want to waste my time anymore, because this is something I really need to understand why things like that can happen. So that really matured me to the extent that I was ready, for some kind of a teaching or some kind of guidance, and I was ready to apprentice myself to something. And then, because it says, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. And then, yes, within 1.5 years, I happened to find myself, at the feet of my first teacher, who was a Thai forest master. That was 1988 that happened. And I still remember very well, because everybody was bowing to him, and I was just saying, I'm never going to bow. I'm not going to do this. And I was staying at the monastery there and was working in the kitchen. And I remember one day the head cook in the kitchen just took my head when we were sitting in front of Ajahn Buddhadasa and just pushed me down on the ground like 3 times like that. And I just didn't want to make a fuss. So I just went down with her like that. And then, I felt really kind of very weird at that moment, but somehow the ice was broken. And then next time I tried it, on my own, and I was like, hopefully nobody's gonna see me, because I had a very uh, very Western, let's say, idea of bowing down is, kind of becoming dominated by somebody else, and all of those ideas we can have about this, you know, physical position of submission, really. And then, I got the taste of it. And then it became a relief, to have somebody or something worth bowing to. I felt a sense of relief, really. And then from then onwards, it was easy. So when I came then to Amaravati a few years later, I was already well uh, trained in bowing, was not a problem. But then there were other things which were a problem. I remember the most difficult one was that the the men and women, had to bring the tray with tea or food on their knees, to the monks. And when I saw that, I got really, again, I said, I'm never gonna do this. Absolutely no, this is crazy. What kind of a place is this? And then, but then also I started to think inside myself, if I would be able to bring a tray like this and not have a nervous breakdown, I think that would be a huge accomplishment for me. So I was another obstacle on the path. So I took some rescue remedy and say, today I'm gonna bring the tray, because if you made breakfast, you had to bring the tray to Ajahn Sumedho on your knees. So I had a few shots of rescue remedy, and then I just, went on my knees with the tray and gave it to him. And I felt afterwards, I felt so happy that I was able to do this. because I'd overcome like a something I never thought I'd be able to do because I would feel so embarrassed doing it. And then, after like a few times, it became no problem. And then the next thing was, then I became an anagarika, and then we had to always, one of the anagarikas had to do a little chant to invite the teacher of the day to give a Dhamma talk. This little chant where Brahma Sahampati, comes down from the heavens and asks the Buddha, please give a teaching out of compassion for those with little dust in their eyes. And this was a little four-line chant in Pali. And I thought again, I can't be an anagarika because I can't do this chant in the temple in front of so many people. I can't do it. I can't do it. And even before I was in theater and I was like performing in front of hundreds of people, it was no problem. But I just thought this chant, I can't do it. But of course I did it because otherwise I wouldn't have been able to be an anagarika. And again, after I did it a few times, I felt so relieved. So I think you probably get it what I wanna speak about. It's those, those obstacles. Some are really rather small and maybe ridiculous, like those I was just mentioning, but some can be huge. And if we can take them, as an opportunity to stretch the mind and the heart, then we are on the path. And this way of dealing with our lives, to really use everything what's happening as food for the practice. This is a teaching I've heard very often when we were in Amaravati, with Ajahn Sumedho. That Ajahn Chah was emphasizing that a lot, and that the practice, in those monasteries of the Ajahn Chah lineage, they're very much geared towards community practice, where lots of people are living together who normally would not live together, but because they all have that aspiration for training and they all wanna, maybe ordain at Amaravati, that's what brings them together. Same here, like at the local vihara as well. We are a very interesting group of people who might not ever have met if they wouldn't have the same aspiration, to practice the Dhamma and to, want to be bhikkhunis and want to get bhikkhuni training. That's what all, keeps us together here. And this, community practice can be very powerful if, we do have the capacity to keep on opening even in the most, and difficult situations. Not opening to anybody in particular, but opening to our own inner experience and to the external things, which are happening to us. This constant opening, opening, and opening again. And in particular, if we are not able to live the ideals we have, the ideals which brought us to this path. Like for me, I was very inspired by, by my first teacher, by his presence, by the way he conducted himself and everything. And, in the beginning, I was very naive and thinking, oh, having this teaching about the four foundations of mindfulness, that's if you know that everything is impermanent, it will be easy, to just deal with my experience. But then it turns out it isn't that easy. Theoretical knowledge is good to have it, but then, when we are really challenged and, on those levels, body, mind, feeling tones, and storylines, all of that, mixing up together into a huge kind of orchestra of input. It's very difficult to stay steady with that, to stay conscious. And living in a community is is ideally the right mixture between support and challenge, so that we do have the support in order to to stay on the path, and to have a certain kind of regularity through the schedule, and through having certain duties to fulfill, and you're working together as a group, and through that regularity, there's the certain kind of worries or certain concerns falling away, and then there's more capacity to ideally look at our own experience. And then at the same time, through living together, there's a lot of different things which arise by being in a situation where you very often do not get your way, would be your preferred way of doing things, or eating things, or not doing things, and everything in between. So the practice in the Ajahn Chah tradition is in particular about that, using the community as a support for waking up, and this constant remembering to let go of our preferences, and allowing the different attachments which we become conscious of through living together with others, to just become conscious of those stories, and then maybe let it go for a moment, and then it comes up again. But then over the years we start to notice certain patterns, and then ideally through long repetition we start to kind of grow a little bit out of certain stories. And that's different for everybody, which stories are coming up first. And then there's capacity increases to not believe in certain stories anymore, and then they drop away, and then the next layer comes up, and the next layer comes up, and gets deeper and deeper in over time. So it's a very powerful tool, and then sometimes also for people it comes to the point where they feel, okay, it doesn't work anymore for me, and then they go somewhere else, or they put down the ropes and become lay people again, and then some people come back again and take the ropes again. So there's many different ways how the practice can happen. But as a general underlying principle, it's about using whatever is happening as a challenge, and opening to it, and allowing ourselves to be changed by that experience, by seeing the impermanence of it, most of all. Seeing the arising and ceasing. And then in even very challenging situations, we can remember, oh, this is impermanent too. I don't necessarily have to make such a big deal out of it. And then if we really are able to not suppress it, but really able to stay steady with it, and we do see the ceasing of it, that instills a sense of confidence that next time maybe we can take something on which is even more challenging. And then our life starts to open up. So in that sense, this constant opening, sometimes, there are experiences which are very, very difficult and we can't see a way forward. And then if you're open to it, and then the path appears. Even we think there's no way forward with this. But then, the path just appears. The path is made by walking. You probably have heard that before. There's like a sense of there's no way forward with this. And then, if we really allow ourselves to be with the experience consciously, we will know what is the next step. We don't necessarily know, the next 10 years ahead, but we know the next step, and that's all we need to know. And that's that saying, the path is made by walking, just knowing the next step and the next step. And really, becoming more and more confident that this is the way to open to the experience. That doesn't mean, that we allow to become doormats of, certain scenarios, but it means opening to it, seeing what is our experience, seeing what is happening, and then from that openness, making the right response, which sometimes is to say no, and sometimes is to say yes, and sometimes is to stay, and sometimes is to go. That's different every time, and also different for different people at different times of their life. But nevertheless, the clarity and the right response comes from allowing oneself to fully experience what is. And there's another poem here in this book from Maddie, which speaks to that. And this bhikkhuni is also called Tissa, Tissa the Third. And she says, why stay here in your little dungeon? If you really want to be free, make every thought a thought of freedom. Break your chains, tear down the walls, then walk the world as a free woman. Then walk the world a free woman. Break your chains and tear down the walls. Those are the attachments, of course, in terms of reactivity or holding on or defending or going unconscious. There's different ways. And, you probably know what yours are. And I know mine. And then walk the world a free woman. Which doesn't mean there won't be any difficulties in the world anymore. There's still old age, sickness and death, and people losing things and being challenged. All of that is still all happening, but meeting it from a different place. A foundation from which we can, really be a fully embodied, human being, where we can allow ourselves to really be part of this world. But not to be completely identified with it. So to stay in relationship, it's not about, turning away from the world or being aloof, in the sense of not wanting to have anything to do with it and wanting to control one's life to the extent that, there is no more challenges, which is anyway impossible. But, many of us have tried and have seen that it doesn't really work. And here she says, make every thought a thought of freedom, which means, letting go. As soon as we are noticing and we're holding on to something, just letting it go, even just for one moment. And then letting it go again and again and again. And then over time, through that training, the chains get broken and the walls are crumbling. And then it becomes, easier and easier to rest in that open awareness. And then be able to participate in the human experience fully and become like those fully enlightened nuns at the time of the Buddha, who were able to really care from a place of strength and love, but they, were including themselves in that. They didn't lose themselves and their direction, what they were working on. And still, they were able to stay connected and stay in relationship and help others. And I brought a little snippet of a note which I have, which is a blessing from my first teacher, which he wrote with his own hand, Ajahn Buddhadasa. And I think it's like a summary of that poem. And he says, not to be sad, not to be glad, but with equilibrium forever. So that's, in a way, the same thing. Make every thought a thought of freedom. And, I don't think he means with not to be sad that we shouldn't be sad, but not identify with that. And not to be glad, not to identify with that, but to stay, stay in the middle as good as we can forever. And of course, we can't do it forever, but we can come back to it again and again and again. And I have that on my shrine because it's a very good advice and it's a good blessing, for all of us, for our practice to, when the going gets tough, to just remember that, just remember to open, just for one moment. And then, if we familiarize ourselves with that, how that feels, it's an acquired taste because it's just so much more what we really want. The sense of ease and that sense of being where we are rather than, having that sense of lack or sense of overwhelm. And that's, what the practice is really all about, that letting go. And, in all schools of Buddhism, so many different skillful means and paraphernalia and outfits and chants and instruments and, you know, a huge spectrum, and everything is geared towards that letting go and the words, training ourselves to be more and more able to rest in that openness. And it's an acquired taste. In the beginning, it's just like hard work and it's just like there's nothing there because we have to refine, our minds and hearts to be able to taste it. And that's, what can be called, the development of the seven factors of awakening. They are all about, refining the mind, sensitizing the mind so the mind can actually taste what that is because it can't be described. It can be only as like, the finger pointing to the moon, but then we have to just look. And the looking means, just letting go. And then, even just for a second, for a split second, So yeah, reading that one more time of Ajahn Buddhadasa, the blessing, not to be sad, not to be glad, but with equilibrium forever. And we have a few more minutes time. If anybody of you has want to share a comment